Hello, my name is Tim Dukert, Research Agronomist for AgroLiquid. Today we're going to take a look at sugar beets and a few ways that you may find to improve or maximize the sucrose yield of your sugar beet crop. Where are sugar beets grown? We think of sugar beets grown mainly in the northern tier of states: Michigan, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and even some other states like Colorado, Nebraska, and even California. About 50 to 60% of the sugar that the United States grows is from sugar beets. Sugar beets are actually kind of unique. They're actually a biannual crop. We typically treat them for sugar crop as an annual. We plant them in the spring, we harvest them later that season for sugar production. Sugar beet seed is actually part of the flower that develops on the sugar beet plant. It winds up with a very small pellet-like seed, which is then coated to make all of our seed uniform and easier to plant through our planting equipment. To get a good stand is pretty important for sugar beets. Since they are that tiny little seed, we need to make sure we come out here and have a really nice fine seed bed produced. It's most important we have uniform soil conditions, that seed bed preparation to make sure we have enough moisture to germinate that sugar beet seed, and just making sure that everything is firm back down so that we keep that moisture there and it doesn't dry out too fast before the emergence happens. Most of the sugar beets in the United States now are grown in narrower rows of about 22 inches. There's still some in 30-inch rows across the country in different areas, but 22 is kind of a norm just to help narrow up the row spacing. Very, very important that we get maximum light capture to each of those individual plants. By closing up that row spacing to like that 22 inches, the crop canopy is able to fill that up and take in all the available light to that plant. So we're out here in this field that could potentially go to sugar beets. We're going to look at a few things that are important to help establish the sugar beet crop. One of those is soil testing. We can take our soil probe, take a few soil samples, put them in our bucket, mix that up, dump it in our handy soil test bag, fill it up to about the red line, send it off to our favorite soil test laboratory, and ask for a complete soil test. That complete test is going to provide you NP and K, but also our micronutrients, and base saturations of the soil, because we're going to look at that a little bit later and see how we can utilize that soil test information to help maximize our sucrose yield. Now that we get our soil test back, we got some information. We can start developing our plan for the new year sugar beets. We want to look at our soil test, and probably one of the first things to look at would be the pH. Try to get all of this in balance, and pH is something that we can easily adjust by adding some lime to increase or some ammonium sulfate to lower the pH. But we want to be between 6 and 7, ideally maybe even closer between 6.5 and 6.8. If we can achieve those goals, it helps us to provide and make available the correct nutrients to our plant during the growing season. How do you fertilize sugar beets? Check with a local agronomist. Check out something like the Ag PhD fertilizer removal app in order to determine the amount of nutrients that each of your crops are going to utilize depending on your yield goal. One thing that we can look at is nitrogen. Nitrogen management is very important in sugar beets. We want to make sure that we have enough available nitrogen early to get that plant started, develop our leaves, get good growth on that plant to capture as much sunlight as possible. Another thing we can look at is phosphorus. We want to make sure we have enough available phosphorus to that sugar beet seedling when we plant it in our cool soil conditions. Because we're planting early, available phosphorus from the soil may not really be there. So we want to get that available to that seedling, and the best way to do that is probably through the planter application early on. The next nutrient, potassium. Many soils in the western areas have available potassium. Potassium is not needed in huge amounts for sugar beet production, but if we have lower soil test levels, we can always add some of that potassium into our fertility program to make sure we have enough for our yield goals. One thing to check out is putting fertilizer on with a planter such as this. How much fertilizer can we actually place directly with the seed? All soil conditions are going to vary on how much fertilizer can go with the seed, and depending on the saltiness of that fertilizer, what is seed safe, make sure that is local guidance is followed for that. Your sandier or lighter textured soils are going to be increasingly dangerous to put fertilizer with the seed, and anytime that the soils are dry, that the potential seed could take up that fertilizer during that emergence germination process is going to be very critical. Why is early fertility so important to a sugar beet? I like to think about this like corn. We know that the ear is determined by its size, the number of kernels around, and the length very early on in its growing process. We want to make sure that we have the correct nutrients available, and that plant does not have a bad day during those phases when that determination is being made. Just like sugar beets. In the first 10 weeks of development, Treby and McGrath found out through some research that sucrose concentration expressed as fresh weight increased from less than 0.5% at the 3rd week for all the germplasm that they tested to over 12% by the 10th week of development. So very important that in those first 10 weeks, we make sure that plant has everything it needs, does not go through any stress periods, and can develop correctly. They also found that more than 40% of the transcribed genes are differentially expressed in developing roots. That means that, again, this plant is already determining the size of that root and potential for the sucrose accumulation later on in the growing season. A critical period for boron in the plant is 4 to 6, and in the 8 to 10 leaf phase stages. The boron helps provide for accumulation of sugars and helps prevent root disease by influencing the calcium balance within that plant. Another critical period is timing is 8 to 12 leaf phase for manganese. Make sure to have enough available manganese to that plant during this time. So for both of those, that can actually be applied early on in the growing season to make sure, again, that we have everything that's needed for that plant and it is off to a good start. Now that the plant is off to a good start, how can the percent of sugar be maximized in our sugar beet plant? One way to do this is with foliar applications. Foliar applications help provide nutrients to help eliminate stress. We really want to make sure that plant has no stress during these critical time periods. Many areas of the country are applying fungicide during the growing season to prevent disease. This is also a good time to apply foliar nutrition. Foliar nutrition can help stimulate the biochemical processes within the plant. So again, providing minute amounts of nutrients at the correct times helps stimulate those processes like the translocation of sugar up and down through that plant. AgroLiquid has many products that can help improve the sugar yield, as seen in lots of our research. Our research has shown that applications of nitrogen through end response, a foliar mix that we've used on many sugar beets, or even our product Fertirain is very good at providing increased sugar accumulation in that sugar beet during that season. A balanced nutrition plan assures that the plant has the necessary nutrients to be healthy, and healthy plants have a greater ability to fight off disease, therefore affording you more sugar accumulation, higher percent, and a higher payout in your sugar beet crop.